Greetings, loves. It is I, Tactical Girlfriend. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everybody's doing well. Today for you, I have a Q&A session. It's been about a year since my last Q&A session. It is now a new year, new spring. Nowruz Mubarak to those who celebrate. And yeah, I figured I would do another one of these sessions, ask my Patreon supporters for questions. They've submitted plenty, actually. And I picked the ones that I had the best answers for, and so I'm going to relay all of that to you. Figure this is a little bit more fun and loose and just something a little bit different, and maybe explore some topics outside the realm of the way I presented them. It just gives me another opportunity to talk about things, and hopefully you all enjoy it. Hopefully it's illuminating, if not entertaining. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, starting at the very top of the list, I'm going to group some of these questions by theme. Let's get all the questions about drills out of the way first. They're relevant and important, and I just want to kind of talk about drills and training in general to start with. So the first question comes from MH Knight 17. Are there any drills or standards that you are currently working on and hoping to accomplish in 2024? I don't really base my drill times and goals off of the year per se. I don't have yearly goals generally. I just happen to incidentally be working on things progressively as I get better and better. You know, I'm going to constantly push myself further after each range trip, after I set the bar for something and set a new goal. That said, currently a goal that I really want to work on is a sub 2-second bill drill. I can get really close, but I'm just not quite there yet. So a more immediate goal would certainly be a 2-second or a sub 2-second bill drill. Also, MH Knight asked, are there any trainings or classes that you're wanting to take? Yeah, absolutely. I would love to take a CQB course, just because I'm curious, not because I'm looking to become an expert in CQB, because you have to do that like every week. One class is definitely not going to make you proficient in anything in that regard, in my opinion. But I would like to just have a more formal understanding of CQB concepts and principles. So I think that'd be interesting. Also, a competitive shooting course led by a very good competitive shooter, of course. As I get more into competitive shooting, I really start to appreciate the mechanics that go into it, while it still translates all your fundamentals over to other kinds of shooting. So regardless, I would like to get more involved in competitive shooting, and I think an actual experienced shooter in competitive realms would be really useful for me. Follow-up question here is, watching your videos competing at the Desert Brutality events were fun. Do you have any plans to become more active in the competitive shooting scene? So yeah, great lead in there. Yes, I do want to. I have not been as active as I would like to. I've actually been doing competitive shooting for years. I've only posted the Desert Brutality videos because they're spectacular and fun, and put on by cool folks, and they're really interesting and noteworthy. But I've been doing a lot more competitive shooting outside of that scope. I just don't show it on the channel. But that said, due to time constraints and finances and other projects that have kind of gotten in the way, I haven't been as active in competitive shooting as I would like to be, but this year I would really, really like to try to push myself to be more active, and specifically I'd like to dabble in a PRS match of some sort, see what that's about. Maybe I will film it and put that up on the channel too. Now, the next question is from Rooney. She asks, which drills are most important in your opinion for competitive shooting of handgun, rifle, and possibly shotgun matches? I don't really think that there's any one magical drill or two magical drills or whatever for this. Drilling is drilling, and getting good at your fundamentals is getting good at your fundamentals, and it's all going to translate over to competitive shooting. That said, when you are doing competitive shooting, you definitely want to work on movements, you want to work on accuracy and speed, you want to work on target transitions, and be super familiar with your weapon. So drills along those lines will certainly help you. I mean, you know, real classic standards like the bill drill, the El Presidente, doubles, box drill, and running your own drills more specifically that incorporate movement and target transitions is going to be what really gets you there. There's no magical drill to get good at competitive shooting. It's just the sum of all its parts. So my advice to you would be to see what you need work on and then identify the drills. I can't prescribe a generic drill for everybody to be good at one task. You need to identify your weaknesses and then train through it. Moving along, Tonkutsu asks, what are your go-to live fire drills for someone just starting out with pistol training? When you're starting out with pistol training, if you're truly starting out, you probably shouldn't really be running any specific drills as much as just demonstrating your fundamentals by getting a tight group on paper through slow fire. Demonstrate that basic marksmanship. That will show that your fundamentals are at least understood and digested, but then you can start to push into things like working under a clock, using a shot timer, but only after you achieve that. I would never say that that's what you should start out with. That said, once you move up to that, you know, the basics like doubles are really, really good to start out with. Then move on to things like the bill drill, El Presidente, failure to stop, get some target transitions in there, work on accuracy under time. Things like that are going to really help you excel. That's almost entering into an intermediate territory though. I would not say that you should start out with those by any means. Hopefully that makes sense. Tonkotsu also asks, what's your favorite style of ramen? My favorite is Yasai. It's full of yummy veggies. It's easy to get vegan. I also at home like to use Indomie ramen, the mee goreng, Indonesian ramen noodles. These things are super cheap. They're extremely tasty, very nice and spicy. Yeah, that's my favorite home brand, at least from the grocery store. Next up, we have Deviant Olam. He asks, if you could have a near endless supply of exactly one make and model of magazine, which you'd be allowed to use or give to others, but you can't sell them for profit, what magazine would that be and why? Yeah, I feel like you might have been looking for some really fancy, exotic, cool answer here, but like, I'm gonna be really pedestrian with you and say the Gen 3 PMags for the AR. Stack these. I absolutely have so many of these, specifically the windowed version, because they're cool. But yeah, honestly, this is kind of the gold standard of an AR magazine for me. It just has been proven in my experience to be the most reliable magazine. It's not without its faults, but I do think that it's going to be hard to find a better magazine more consistently made than these. These are absolutely good to stockpile, and if I could order infinity amount of these, I would. These are really, really good mags. Sorry if that's boring, but that's the truth. Deviant Olam also asks, if I recall, you abstained from meat and I think possibly also dairy. Has this always been the case, or was it a choice you came to later in life? Yeah, good question. I have not always been a vegetarian or a vegan. I'm currently vegan. I have been vegetarian for 19 years and vegan for 10 years. Really showing my age here, but yeah, it's been a while since I've had meat, and it was a choice that I absolutely made for myself. I personally don't want to kill animals if I can help it. I personally don't want to consume dairy if I can help it. I'm a bit critical of the agricultural industry and aspects of animal cruelty and global warming and climate change and all that. You know, those things in mind had made me choose to abstain. I don't think there's any morality around this. It's just a personal ethic for me and a personal choice. If I can help it, I would like to not consume those things. But, you know, there's no conscious consumption under capitalism and all that. It just, yeah, it is what it is. I know the tofurkey I ate is probably also made with some very poor labor practices and resource extraction. But, you know, it's just a personal choice for me. And it is one that I made a little bit later in life. I was still young, but yeah, hopefully that answers that. Moving right along, the next question is actually two questions rolled into one because they were so similar. Mateo asks, brandishing or pointing a gun, or even just to make it clearly visible in order to scare away an attacker, yes or no, and why? Big Ben Parliament asks, I was talking to a retired service member recently, and they said you should only pull your weapon if you've already decided that you're going to shoot. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement? Should your gun only leave its holster if you already know without a doubt that your next move is pulling the trigger? Really, really good question. Very important one. There's two perspectives I want to approach this with. For one, a escalation or de-escalation perspective, where we need to look at critically what you're doing in a situation, whether it's escalating or de-escalating the situation, which is the better move for you and your own safety. And also from a legal perspective, if you are involved in a self-defense shooting, the cops are going to confiscate your gun and they will take you to court, almost certainly. And that's a very precarious situation and it can absolutely ruin your life, so you don't want to mess that up, just thinking selfishly here even. Now, from the de-escalation standpoint, pulling a gun out is never de-escalating. You should check my video about de-escalation out. But regardless, brandishing a weapon is not a form of de-escalation. If you don't need the weapon to provide lethal force in the moment, then you should not be brandishing the weapon. You are only escalating the violence and the perceived threat of violence to your attacker, who may then escalate further in return. And you've given them an opportunity to do so, so even strategically, it's a horrible idea. Further, yeah, that could go south really quick. I don't think that you should be using a weapon for something it's not meant to be used for. Guns can be intimidating. I don't think they need to be, and I don't think they necessarily should be, and they definitely shouldn't be used for that. That has more symbolic power than real power if you haven't already committed to violence. And flashing your gun is, I think, very foolish in that regard. Now, from a legal standpoint, how is a jury going to interpret your actions in that encounter, in that self-defense case that you are in now? If you brandish a weapon, generally the jury is probably not going to think that's a good idea. If they have any reason, without a doubt, that you brandished a weapon unnecessarily, that will be used against you and it can absolutely destroy your entire case. So from a legal standpoint, it's also no bueno. That's a horrible, horrible idea. Violence is fast. It's hard to think clearly. People do mess up. Sometimes people will brandish weapons because they think it is the right thing to do. I can't say for every case that that's true or not, but generally I would say err on the side of caution here that it's almost certainly a very, very bad idea. Guns are meant for one thing only in the self-defense perspective, and that is to employ lethal force when it's needed. If it's not needed, you should probably be resorting to other means like non-lethal, running away, of course, if you can, getting other people involved to de-escalate a situation, and yourself to de-escalate the situation verbally if you can. Those things need to be exhausted first before you ever result in, brandishing a weapon, flashing a gun at somebody. That's not a good idea, in my opinion. All right, Saul Goodman asks, what can I do to help others get into the firearms and training community, and what budget firearms would you recommend for those with less financial freedom? Well, for the first half of your question, in order to get involved into the firearms and training community, you have to want to. If you don't want to, then you won't. So figure out what motivates you or motivates someone else. Beating them over the head with, you have to train, you have to train, you have to train, is not necessarily going to be that encouraging. I found that making all of this social is really, really nice because it, for one, makes it fun, which is like the best motivator in the world. And beyond that, it also makes you accountable. If your friends are going out shooting and they invite you to go along, you'll probably feel a little bit pressure to go and show up because you're your friends and you want to hang out. So that's really good. So be sure that you go shooting with your friends. If you don't have friends, make friends. Take classes together, attend shooting competitions and other events together, and that will go a very, very long way. Furthermore, if you're ambitious, you should definitely start a gun club if you want to scale up from your friend group. If you need to get new people involved that you don't necessarily know that well, a gun club is a really good way to interface with that. And when I say gun club, I mean it's literally just a circle of people who agree to do a thing together who happen to like guns. That can be anything. Use your imagination, but that's a great way to further scale up getting community built from the ground up. Now, with regards to budget firearms, I mean, the word budget doesn't mean anything. It only means what it means to you. So I don't know what your budget is. I'm assuming I'm going to approach this question from a point a perspective that I have, and that's a self-defense oriented shooter. I want something that's reliable but affordable. In that case, if I'm looking for a handgun, like you already know I'm going to say, it's Glock. Get a Glock. And if the sticker price on Glock is too expensive, there's options alternative to that sticker price that you can pursue, such as the Blue Label program. If you don't qualify for that, you might be able to find a friend who does. They can buy a gun and then sell it to you at that price. You can also just apply to the Glock Sport Shooting Foundation, which will get you Blue Label Glocks at that Blue Label price. That's just another way to pursue that. Furthermore, the Smith & Wesson MMP series is really good. It usually is a little bit more affordable, and I really enjoyed shooting those. They seem to be very trustworthy and effective. Beyond that, I hate to recommend it, but the PSA Dagger maybe, only because I can't vouch for it, so I can't really recommend it. But those seem to be pretty affordable and good, striker-fired 9mm alternatives. So that might be something to look into. Again, I can't say that's a good option. You should do your homework, but it is something to consider. And that said, if you're looking for a rifle, there's a million rifles out there. If you're looking for something with an intermediate cartridge, that's semi-automatic, AR-15 all day, every day, of course. And buy the best one that you can afford. There's tons of brands out there. Do your research. Again, there's so many different price tiers here. If you are on a very bare bones budget and all you can afford is a PSA, Palmetto State Armory, AR-15, then yeah, you can get one of those. Their quality control is terrible. But if your rifle works, it probably will work fine. If not, they will take care of you, and that's good. But it's definitely not the best quality, but it is attainable. Now, beyond all that, if you can't afford a proper weapon with proper accessories and ammo and money set aside for training, then guns are not for you. You can't afford guns, and that's real. A lot of people can't, and that's okay, because fortunately, if you're defensively minded, guns are almost never justified in a self-defense situation where a non-lethal weapon would be. So pepper spray, you can get that stuff for like $10. It's infinitely more practical than a firearm ever will be, except for the very few rare times that a firearm is actually what's needed. Again, people have this fantasy about self-defense in their mind, and they want to be armed to the teeth, but like in all reality, you can very affordably defend yourself with non-lethal means. And guns are really expensive. So again, budget considered in all, you need to determine that for yourself and your self-defense plan and needs. BCalbs asks, outside of firearms, do you train any other martial arts, be it to enhance your self-defense skills or just for pure enjoyment? I don't train martial arts as much as I would like to. I'm a strong advocate that you do if you are serious about self-defense. I'm not as focused as I would like to be in it, and maybe that's kind of a good thing. I dabble in mixed martial arts, including things like boxing and kung fu, jiu-jitsu and judo. That said, I would love to actually get involved in Muay Thai. I think that's really interesting, and I think it's a good style for me personally. And yeah, I think I would like to do more of that because I do enjoy it. It is for personal enjoyment, and it is practical for self-defense. And Squirrels asks, is there a baseline to master before signing up for a competition? What's a good goal to feel ready for a USPSA competition? I wouldn't know. I've never attended a USPSA competition. I am kind of on the fence, actually, if I want to. That's just me and my preference for the kinds of rule sets that we're working with here. But regardless, with competitions in general, the baseline to master is that you need to follow the rules. That's literally it. As long as you can attend a competition without getting disqualified, it's a good day. You will return home with valuable lessons that far outweigh however much you paid for that competition every single time. There is no baseline other than the one that you set for yourself. As long as you aren't breaking that 180 or NDing or holding your gun at the wrong time or whatever, you can miss all your shots in a competition and it's still going to be a valuable experience for you. So I don't think that there's any baseline. Get out there, go to a competition. If you feel like you can follow those rules, if you can move and shoot well enough to be able to not break those rules, then you should show up at a competition. I strongly encourage everyone to do that, regardless of their experience, because you're gonna learn so much. It's not about winning. It's, for me personally at least, about learning. And comp is really, really good for that. So definitely give it a shot. Moving right along, Anonymous asks, who do you recommend to learn from for those who are looking to get into night vision devices and lasers? There's some good YouTube channels actually that I would strongly recommend you check out, specifically for their content on night vision. Silent Solutions is probably the best one. TNVC is pretty good. Kinetic Consulting has a few good videos. Hop and Brass Facts both also do cover some good material on this stuff. So definitely check them out. I feel like my night vision video was not actually that popular because I think most people aren't really getting into night vision and it's not that practical, but it is an interesting subject. I'll leave it for the super nerds to talk more about it. I might also get more into it later on down the line. It just hasn't been a huge priority for me to talk about on this channel. Pat asks, any tips for dealing with astigmatism and using a red dot? Recently found out, even though I've been running dots for years. Great question. I actually just made a huge post about this. You should definitely check it out. It's going to be far more eloquent than I am right now. But that said, I have astigmatism. I shoot red dots all the time. I carry a red dot. I trust my life to it. And yeah, I make them work. And the thing is, with red dots, with reflex optics in general, and people with astigmatism, people get really hung up on the details when they see a bloom that's distorted off of the reticle, and they say, oh, I can't use this. The truth of the matter is you almost certainly can. Most people with astigmatism, in my experience, absolutely can use red dots very effectively, and more effectively than they ever would with irons. And that just is inherent with that kind of sighting system. If you've tried all the optics out there, all the reflex optics, you've tried green and red reticles and different reticle shapes, you've tried all the different pieces of glass out there between manufacturers, and everything is just way too distorted for you to use, then yeah, you should seek out an alternative sighting system like a prism or a holographic sight. That said, if the dot is just slightly distorted and you can just focus on the target, it's probably not even going to be noticeable when you're shooting. If you can figure out where the center of that reticle is and use that as your indexing point and train it every single time to be your point of aim, then you're fine. And that is true in my case. I do see starburst out of reflex optics, and I still use them, and I'm still effective. Don't ever call it quits on something until you have the holes on paper to tell you why. If you're shooting tight groups, then don't even question it. You're doing fine. Upgrading to some other optic is not necessarily going to be an upgrade. So make sure that you understand whether or not that's a deal breaker for you, and then go from there. Figure out what's best for you. Aurora asks, how do I best keep my private information safe while interacting online? I've heard some users have had their serial numbers read off of photos, then their guns get reported as stolen. Yeah, that is something that can absolutely happen. The problem is that the person reporting it then needs to probably prove that it is their gun, and they can't do that. The good news is that you easily can. Even if your gun does successfully get reported as stolen, you can just simply report it as found because you own it and it's in your possession and you have the legal paperwork to prove it. So it's a mild inconvenience at worst, really, if somebody does this. I mean, it's a jerk move, but it's not that big of a deal. Still, obscuring your serial numbers online is good OPSEC. I do encourage it. Furthermore, with OPSEC online in general, there's a lot to be considered here. I mean, if you're trying to keep a low profile, try Googling your name and seeing where it comes up. You want to get your name scrubbed off the internet as much as you can if that is a concern. Identify where that's coming up in see what you can do about it. You can opt out of data broker and people search sites. You can remove personal information from accounts, delete unused accounts, keep social media accounts private, restrict data collection settings on accounts. William asks, I've noticed over the past couple of years that the tone of the mainstream online gun community has grown increasingly toxic. Do you think this sort of thing may simply be reflective of the overall trend among right-wing politicians and media, or might it be a reaction to the growing segment of non-traditional gun owners, or might it be some combination thereof? Also, do you think that this tone is representative of in real-life mainstream gun community, or is it more of an issue of the loudest, most extreme voices attracting the most attention? Great question. I have absolutely noticed that the gun community has in some ways actually gotten better recently because non-traditional gun owners are getting into it and people are kind of navigating the cultural fabric of that. But there's also been backlash against it for sure. And regardless, the toxic aspect of the gun community online, at least, has noticeably gotten way worse. The messaging, the dog whistles, and everything that you can find in almost every gun tuber out there besides me is pretty bad. Not always. There's definitely exceptions, but the norm has definitely shifted. The Overton window has shifted. I think that US politics are polarizing, and there is a growing divide in this country that is making people adopt more extreme views, especially in the right, and become more loud and vocal and more willing to lash out. And yeah, I think it's a big problem. And it's definitely a reaction to politics as well as new gun owners being new demographics that we traditionally haven't seen as much of in beyond the last 4 years. So it's a little bit of everything. As far as in real life gun community and how those folks are comprised and how they position themselves among their fellow shooters, there are some loud, annoying voices out there, and I do think that they attract a lot of attention, but the norm, in my experience, almost always consistently, even if I disagree with some of these people on pretty much everything, is that they're actually pretty chill in person and they're personable. The thing is that if you have complete polar opposite politics, but you can converge on something that you enjoy doing together and you do that thing together, you're probably going to focus on enjoying that thing that you're doing together and not worry about the rest. So even if there are like unsavory characters in my spaces that I'm shooting, I'm not really worried about it because there's a shared understanding that we're just there to do our thing and have fun, and no one has fun talking politics on the range. It's just not the place to do it, and I don't think many people want to. So I do think that in real life, those voices are actually very, very small. Even if other people might agree with them, that's not really the point. That's not why people are there. And I get along with pretty much everybody around me all the time. I've actually really never had a problem when I've been at the range or anywhere to train because of politics necessarily. Not saying that's not going to be the case for everybody, but in my experience, people can come together and shoot guns even if they don't agree on anything and still have a good time and be really chill and personable about it. Elgato asks, I'm a firearms educator in Texas. One of the biggest issues I've come across is motivating people to take it more seriously and train, especially LGBTQ and people of color. What really motivated you to train more and take this martial art seriously? What advice do you have for mentoring trans people on the importance of self-defense education? Well, I, for one, have no illusions about firearms training being the be-all, end-all of self-defense, and it's not. It's, again, a very niche way to train for self-defense, and if you're doing that, you should be doing other things even more, probably, because they're more practical than guns. That said, I was motivated by my own sense of self-preservation. I used to be a dabbler and collector and tinkerer with firearms. I had a more historical interest in them, but I did personally start to take an interest in my own self-defense and I started to acquire more modern firearms and train to actually get good at them. And that was purely out of a sense of self-preservation. That said, I don't have any illusions around it. I live a very peaceful life. I never get into fights. I avoid confrontations as much as I can, and I intend to keep it that way. I don't think I'll ever use a gun on somebody. If I can help it, I would like to not to. That said, I've seen horrible things happen to good people in my own life, and it's made me think a lot about it. And again, that comes from a sense of self-preservation. I want to be able to use a firearm competently, and you should be training to be doing that extremely competently. And that is a choice that you need to make for yourself if you can commit to that or not. Because if you can't, you cannot half-ass self-defense with a firearm. In my opinion, that just is not an option. So people need to choose for themselves whether they're going to take it seriously or not. You can't really motivate them. Again, like I talked about earlier, you can facilitate people getting involved by creating community, by getting your friends together to go to the range or start a gun club or something like that. But it's up to every individual to choose what's right for them. And it's important to educate them on the things to consider when they're making these choices, but they alone need to make that choice. And they need to plan, for their own self-defense plan, and that might involve other means, and it probably should. And it's important to just consider all of those points. So the best thing you can do is help facilitate and foster this stuff, ask important questions, build community, all of that. All Branch No Tree asks, training can be very expensive, and it's as likely as not that you will be training under what we may euphemistically call questionable masters. I've always been of the school of good information is good information, regardless of the source. What are your thoughts on training when it benefits less desirable people? I mean, you said it really well. I mean, good information is good information. If you think that information is worth it to you for the price you're paying, for the money that you are putting in the pocket of said questionable instructor, then it's worth it. It's really simple. Is it worth it for you to pay someone to receive the training that you're getting, even if you don't like them? That's not something I can answer for you, but it is a question that you need to ask yourself. And personally, in my case, I'm not actually really that opposed to learning things from people I don't like, because, again, good information is good information, and in this realm, you're almost certainly going to have to do it at some point, and that's just reality. All Branch No Tree also asked, in your opinion, is it inadvisable to attempt to help others to train if I'm not, certified NRA instructor or whatever? I think having a certification is good. That said, the NRA certification is a very, very low bar, and it doesn't actually mean anything beyond what it says on paper. And personally, I'd rather learn from someone who has good competition chops and scores that I can easily reference. I'd be far more impressed if somebody had a way to demonstrate that they're actually good at shooting, rather than saying I'm an NRA instructor, because that to me means nothing. The worst shooters can become NRA instructors if they really try. So be very discerning with a teacher. Make sure that they can properly teach what you want to learn and can demonstrate that through past experience. And at the same time, if you are a teacher, you should make sure that you only are teaching things that you know you can very easily and competently pass along. It's not enough to just have good fundamentals. You need to be able to actually demonstrate good fundamentals and explain that to your students. So beyond an NRA certification or anything like that, or any piece of paper, what's most important is that you have integrity, and that your instructor also has integrity, vice versa. Up next, Anonymous asks, do you actively avoid any firearms or accessories companies because of your political convictions? Beyond purchasing items on the used market, it can sometimes be difficult to avoid certain brands, especially if they're the only ones making a specific item. Yeah, good question. I mean, I don't think there's any such thing as ethical consumption for the most part. There are brands in the industry that I think are led by much cooler people than most, especially good folks at KE Arms, Guerrilla Tactical, Lead and Steel. All really good people in my opinion. That said, they're a huge exception to the rule, and generally this industry is lousy with very lousy people. And that's true of any industry, though. It's not just the gun industry. So if you buy stuff, you're probably buying things and giving money to horrible people. You should probably just go off to the woods and be a primitivist if you absolutely can't live with yourself for that. But that said, if you need a gun, you need a gun, so you're gonna probably buy a gun. Again, kind of like the previous question, if it's worth it to you to give money to somebody that you don't like to get something that is more useful to you, and that outweighs whatever you feel is done by giving somebody unsavory money, then you should absolutely pursue it. I buy all sorts of things from all sorts of terrible people because it's worth it to me. I can't make that choice for you. Again, the used market, maybe like, yeah, you can argue that's good and more sustainable, honestly, but that gives you a little bit more purchasing freedom, for sure. I get that, but at the end of the day, like, there's a lot of terrible people making a lot of good products, and good products that can ultimately benefit you more than whatever drop in the bucket penny that you throw at them. So don't get caught up in the idea that you're going to ethically consume anything here, because you're not. And even the people with the best intentions, still, you know, there's criticisms about resource extraction and all sorts of things. I mean, we could get really universe brain about this, but like, really, is it worth it to you? That's going to be the question. I think there are brands that are honestly annoying that I won't buy from, like T-Rex Arms and Spike's Tactical, to name a couple, but like, I accept that there's at least me giving some money to somebody I don't like to get what I really like, and that just comes with the territory. And Chris asks, your in the field video quality is great, really well shot. As a videographer in a former life, I'd like to know what you're shooting with. Video, not pew-pew. Well, I mean, first and foremost, credit goes to the ladies at the range that film me. That's where the magic really happens. They are the ones capturing it. It's not just the gear, but if you want to know what I shoot with, it's a Nikon Z6 mirrorless camera, a DJI Ronin RS3 gimbal, and a Rode VideoMic Pro Plus. Nothing too fancy, but it's a good setup and it works really well for me. Poison Plasma asks, what are your favorite video games? Well, I honestly don't really play video games much at all anymore, but when I do, and when I have more recently, I've really enjoyed Insurgency Sandstorm, Squad, and Cyberpunk 2077. Honestly, very predictable ones. I'm sorry if that's disappointing, but those are probably my top three. Everderp asks, I currently have a Glock 19 and a 22. I love both of them. However, I have done as much shooting as I can with them, but it seems that my accuracy isn't all that great. I tend to pull to the lower left and lower right. What have you done to improve the accuracy with your Glock? Well, it's not the Glock. If you have inconsistent groups, it is you. And you need to determine if that's being caused by poor grip, if it's flinch response, combination of the two. It sounds like if you're shooting low in general, it probably is flinch response, which you absolutely should train yourself out of and work on it constantly. We all have to do that. If we flinch with pre-ignition movement on the gun, then your shots will not line up where you think they should be, and that all happens in microseconds. I have videos about this, videos about fundamentals, about grip. Definitely check those out. But beyond flinch response, you gotta understand that a good grip will usually compensate for any other shortcomings. So work on your grip. Mess with your grip modules on your Glock in case your hands are not fitting on it well, and really strengthen your non-dominant hand. Get used to understanding what is good grip and what isn't. Go seek out an instructor if you need to. But that will almost certainly fix whatever you're struggling with. Can't guarantee it. You got to diagnose it yourself. I'm not there with you. But good grip and worry about your flinch response. That's probably it. Up next we have Maple. She asks, what gun or caliber have you always wanted to shoot but just haven't had the chance to get hands-on with it yet. God, this is gonna sound so stereotypical, but a Barrett M82 in 50 BMG. Just because that round has so much ass behind it and it seems really fun to shoot. The Barrett's a beast. It's kind of comical. I don't know. I think an anti-material rifle is a really interesting rifle, and I don't really have much experience with those kinds of rifles, so I would love to try one. Speaking of dream guns, Tyler asks, what's the top 5 on your firearm bucket list? I'm assuming this means to own. I've always wanted a Chiappa Rhino. It's a very silly gun. It's absolutely not practical. It's absolutely vanity and nothing else. But it's a cool looking revolver. It's very spacey, futuristic, cyberpunky as far as revolvers go. I don't even really like revolvers, but that one seems very enticing. Also, much lower bore axis due to the way that the cylinder is integrated with the barrel on that. It's a cool design. Also, I would love to get some sort of Henry lever action. I've shot so many lever actions. I love them to death. I've never owned one. So that's pretty up there actually, and is pretty practical, easy enough to acquire at least. Next, the PKM, for sure. Very, very effective and reliable light machine gun. It's legendary. It's just a really cool light machine gun. And, you know, I could have much fancier ones out there, but the PKM actually seems like, if you're gonna get a light machine gun, it's actually a pretty practical option on the market. Next, the P90, for sure. If you've ever watched Stargate, if you liked Stargate, you probably like the P90. It's also just another cool space age looking gun. And I'm not even crazy about bullpups, but that one's really fun, even though the triggers on those are god-awful. It's still a really cool design concept, and it's very novel to me. And lastly, the most ridiculous choice I could possibly have on this list, the M134 GAU-17. Having that kind of firepower feels otherworldly, and I would love to experience it, let alone own one. Again, an absolutely ridiculous choice, and probably not practical at all, but hey, if I could get one, I would. Arkinum asks, do you have a favorite bag gun or short-barreled PCC? No, I don't. I carry a Glock 19 every day. That's like the biggest thing I can carry. If I'm going to be more overt, I'm going to use a rifle. Furthermore, if I wanted a bag gun, even though that's totally not something that I have any interest in doing, I would get a shorter rifle. If I'm not able to get 5.56 out of 11.5, like the one I have, or 10.3, then I probably need to consider something else ballistically, like 300 Blackout, and then I can just have the bag gun with rifle capability. I don't understand pistol calibers out of semi-auto only PCCs. They don't really offer any advantage that a rifle caliber wouldn't do better. So, like, I get it if all you want to do is collect 9mm, then sure, if it costs is a thing, but like, if you're actually like seriously preparing for self-defense, then like, I would rather have rifle capability instead of a bag gun that uses pistol caliber. And if I need pistol caliber, I'm just going to use my handgun that I'm very familiar with and carry every day and train with more than anything. So no, I don't get the PCC thing, honestly. I think submachine guns have their purpose, PCCs honestly don't, and it's kind of a gimmick. I know, hot take, whoa, but I like pistols to be pistols, I like rifles to be rifles. Okay, sue me. And Dana asks, if you couldn't run a standard fighting rifle like an AR or AK, what would you choose to fill in the 0 to 150 yard-ish bubble, and why? Well, I mean, that's kind of hard because ARs and AKs, of course, are kind of the go-to for that role, but I'd probably go with a SIG MCX. Some people are going to argue, oh no, that's too AR, but like, it's not an AR actually. They have similar operating principles, but they are distinct systems. The SIG MCX series seems very attractive, and I've liked what I've shot so far. If that's too AR for this answer, then I would say a SIG 553. The Swiss make excellent guns. The 5.53 has an excellent reputation. It seems like a really solid system. It's not what I would choose to run normally, but it does seem like, honestly, one of the better options on the table once you take ARs and AKs off of it. The 5.53 has good ergonomics too. It's reliable, reportedly, from what I've heard. It's not very heavy. It's got good features, so yeah, I think that would be my choice. And last but not least, Wendy asks, any thoughts or suggestions you might want to share on possible events and preparedness measures for possible upcoming crazy happenings with the summer and fall leading up to the 2024 election and afterwards? God, I hate election year. I really, really hate election year because everyone freaks out and nothing generally actually happens. The writing's always on the wall if you really are paying attention. Someone's going to get elected. People are not going to like it. They might throw a fit about it. Either way. But like real political change, real disaster, real calamity, real civil unrest doesn't necessarily happen due to elections. It can, but more often than not, it doesn't. And if you aren't already prepared for that, then I would say preparing for a single election is just not worth it, because it pretty much almost never turns into anything that's actually long-lasting on a national scale, at least. If you have some real local threat assessment that you need to be making and need to make preps for whatever reason, then you already know what you're doing. I'm not the one to tell you that. But in terms of preparedness, I mean, yeah, like if you are worried about end of the world situations during election time, don't hold your breath, live your life, don't live it in fear, because almost nothing will ever happen. And I would never bank on anything happening just because of an election. Politics are way more complicated than that. Things get protracted and drawn out, and flare-ups happen in society, and civil unrest can happen very quickly when you least expect it. So again, if you're not already prepared for it, you probably won't ever be until you actually take that more seriously as a contingency for the undetermined future, indefinitely. So, I mean, what those preps look like are entirely dependent on your use case, whether you're preparing to, I don't know, leave an area where a riot might be happening, or you're going to join the riot. I don't know what that means to you. Or if you just need to leave the country, maybe that's a thing too, get a passport. I don't know. This is a huge topic, and I hate to be dismissive here, but instead of going into all the nuances of every direction that this can go, I'm not really that much of a prepper. I try to be able to bug out of my place if I need to, and more importantly, bug in and have friends, have community, and know people who I would trust my life with, and talk to them about it and figure out what kind of contingency you're preparing for, and train and execute and make sure that that plan is understood by all parties and that it is regularly drilled on and reviewed. Those are big concepts. I'm not gonna even start to touch about like talking about water filtration and personal security and you know, home security and all of that. There's so much in the subject, but basically train hard for what you think you need to train for. Train with people who you can trust. Stay in touch with those people. Revisit this training on a regular basis and have a realistic threat assessment. Don't let the election year scare you. We got better things to worry about, honestly. I don't really care who gets elected this year because it doesn't matter. And I would rather focus on the things that actually bring me joy and plan on real contingencies that last longer than a few months in terms of what I'm preparing for. If that makes any sense. I hope it does. And so that concludes yet another Q&A. This is my second one, and hopefully it was a good compliment to the channel. Hopefully the questions were very interesting and my answers were insightful, if not entertaining. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell too. And of course, this video literally would not exist without my supporters on Patreon asking me these questions, let alone this channel wouldn't exist without my supporters on Patreon, period. You all are the lifeblood of this channel. I don't run ads on it, I don't make money in any other way through the channel. I do work a day job, and I pour a lot of my spare time, energy, money, and resources into this channel, and I'm just trying to recoup what I can. So anything that you can help out with is greatly appreciated. If you want to go chip in, you can always go to patreon.com/tacticalgf. The biggest contributors are named at the end of the video. And that's a wrap. I really enjoyed your questions. I hope you enjoyed my answers, and that's all I got for you today. I really appreciate you all tuning in. Please be good to each other out there, and as always, please take care. Bye!